I'm a big believer in something called shareholder capitalism, which is this belief that to treat a company well, you need to have relatively happy customers. You need to do right by your customers, and you need to do right by your team members or employees. And if you do so while maintaining healthy margins, the business becomes sustainable. As I grappled at the young age of well, what's the purpose of life here? I had won your 30 under 30 awards and your 20 in your 20s, and I had been fortunate to make millions of dollars at that point. And to be honest, I was an empty shell. And so I started taking a step back and saying, what's my purpose? And how can I provide value? Take a leap of faith. People get so, over time, stuck in their lane and comfortable with what they do. And what I've loved about my entrepreneurial journey, well, mostly love about it, is every day pushes you to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, an Endeavor Business Media production. This is episode number 381. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you so much for tuning in again. Today, we have a great episode with Cory Pinegar. It's great because sometimes it's nice to catch up with people. Cory's been on the show before, but it's been a really long time. You're going to love his passion. I think one of the things that you'll love probably the most about him is how he looks after his employees. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can learn here, especially for those of you that are moving to leadership positions, or maybe you're considering your next step after clinical hygiene. You can put a lot of the principles that he talks about into place for your own leadership track. And I think that that is probably, if you read any of the leadership books and the self-help books, a lot of the things that he's putting into place for his company are the things that they all advocate for. But unfortunately, a lot of companies just don't follow through with that. And so definitely take some notes for this one. And then next week, we have an episode on medical billing for dentistry with Danielle Brown. It's a topic I don't think that we've covered very often, and I know we want to do a deeper dive at a later time, but I wanted to kind of give you an introduction that this is possible. This is someone's business, and what does that look like? So be sure to hit that subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss that episode, and you always have the most current episodes at your fingertips. And then the last thing before we get into the episode, and I'll be very clear that, what I'm about ready to talk about is they're not a sponsor, but I think it's a really cool thing, and I think it's unique and inventive, something that you should all know about. I heard about this new flossing tool from a company called Slate Dental. They're a startup out of Washington State, which is my home state. So of course, yay, go them. And they will be at RDH Under One Roof. So if you happen to be a little bit interested in what I had to say, then make sure you stop by their booth and maybe learn a little bit more. Being an audio podcast, this might come across not the most clear. So I'll just do my best to use words to help you understand what it is. But envision, if you will, those disposable flossers that all of our patients are using nowadays that you'll see in the grocery store parking lots and things like that. So imagine that. Now imagine an electric toothbrush with sonic technology and put them together. So I guess kind of like a sonic flosser of sorts. And at first I was thinking, man, this is so gimmicky. We're just trying to combine some technologies that people are used to and understand and throw them together. But the brilliance behind the tool is not that the floss vibrates. That's not the thing that is, oh my gosh, amazing. But it's the cleaning and massaging action of where the floss connects. There is a tool that helps clean and stimulate that embrasure space really well. And there's like a tongue scraper. There's all sorts of parts. I'm not going to be able to explain this very well, and I probably should have asked them for some talking points if I was going to talk about it. But it was one of the best cleaning devices that I've ever had. And I just realized, there's so many people that I've seen that could benefit from exactly this tool. I think it's pretty amazing. So when I heard about it, I had emailed back and forth with Bryn, and I asked them if they had a professional discount so I could purchase it for myself, which ended up being very, very affordable. So if you're interested, I would say reach out to her. Her name is Bryn, Brynn, at slateflosser.com. And see if she can hook you up with a discount as well. I think there's just going to be so many uses with this tool. I'm really excited that they thought of it. And I hope that you all get as excited about it as I am. So, all right, that is all for me for this week. Be safe. Enjoy this episode with Cory Pinegar.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome, everyone, into the interview portion of the podcast. I am joined by Cory. Cory, it's been a really long time. Welcome back.
Andrew, good to see you. Good to be on. Appreciate the opportunity.
Cory, it was episode 121 that you were on before. I think this episode is going to be in like the high 300s. So, yeah, what was it? May 2018. 5 years it's been since you've been on. So I have a lot of questions to kind of catch up. First things first, walk me through just like the various changes that have happened with you and your company. And then I want to talk about the new startup too in this little intro part.
Yeah, it's been 5 years. That is
5 years.
Time flies.
Because when did you acquire it? It was Call Force, right? When did you acquire that originally? 2016?
December of 2016.
Okay. Yeah. So it was kind of a relatively like newish baby, a year and a half at that time for us.
No. Yeah. We were very, very early on, maybe a year or two in. First year was an absolute grind. Mm-hmm. You're figuring out how do you fit into the market. I had no experience within the dentistry side of the world, no connection. So it was figuring a lot of stuff out. I think, Andrew, it took us 6 months to sell our first practice.
Oh, wow.
Today, we're a couple thousand practices that we actively service in total. We are a couple hundred team members spread throughout the United States and even over the world now. And we're just continuing to grow. We're adding 50 to 125 new locations a month and just continuing to develop our services to be better. And our goal is just to provide an impact to dentistry where we're giving better patient care. We're making the life of the office easier and we treat our team members well. And I'm a big believer in something called shareholder capitalism, which is this belief that to treat a company well, you need to have relatively happy customers. You need to do right by your customers, mm-hmm. and you need to do right by your team members or employees. Yeah. And if you do so while maintaining healthy margins, the business becomes sustainable. And so
love that.
We have spent the last 5 years. We're not outside of dentistry today. We have 3 services that we provide, and our focus is how do we have 3 services that are impactful and value-based. We don't want to be the jack of all trades company, mm-hmm. where we pretend that we can do everything and we don't do it that well. I'd rather do 3 or 4 things really well. And you look at the numbers, I think there's almost 200,000 active dental practices in the U.S. mm-hmm. today. We service roughly 2% of that. We have scratched the surface on where we're at. And people are like, oh, are you going to go into chiropractic or audiology or optometry? And it's like, we have so much more potential to go within dental where we can serve our customers better and enhance the lives of our team member. And the company will naturally grow because of it.
Man, I wish you could, I know you don't want to take on one more little thing, but I wish you could take this embodiment of, treating your team right and throw that into a dental office and be like, hey, owners and managers, this is how you run a practice by taking care of your people. And you're going to be so much more successful because of it.
Well, I mean, to be honest, this is all learned. This is not that I woke up when I was 22 years old. We've experienced times where we had high attrition of our team members, and it's tough. Because the people that you need long-standing people within the business that are a blend of rock stars, people who own their job and do it really well, and superstars, people who want to grow through the company. But to scale, you can't do it yourself. I eventually want to work myself out of a job because there's so many people who do it better below me.
Yeah, no, that's great.
You have to pay your team members well. You have to give them promotions, but it will de-stress your life. And I only say that is because we've had times where we've had high attrition and endless stress. And you get to the point where you say, I don't want that. And you have to systematize the business in a way where it runs itself. We never want to run a business that is based on 1, 2, or 3 people. The business is based on the business. If I were to die in a freak accident later today, I would hope that nothing fundamentally would change in how we run.
Wish I had my little applause button right here. That is spot on. I love that. Let me ask you, maybe you don't have an answer for this. Maybe you do. So in those times when you had high attrition, And I'm thinking back to the dental hygienist maybe has multiple patients that maybe don't come back to see them or something like that. Word gets out, right? Word gets out that, oh my gosh, don't go work for them. Oh my gosh, don't go to that dental office or whatever. How do you not care? How do you not care about that kind of, how do you not take it personal? Because hygienists are very, we take things very personally.
And what you're saying is how do you overcome bumps in the road?
Yeah.
You take it really personal to start. I remember the first bad Google review that we got. I remember the first bad Glassdoor review. But the thing that I have to remember, and I am no expert, to be very clear, is that it's a game of aggregates. So if we have 100 customers, one of them may be upset. Two of them may be upset. But what you also want to be very cautious of is that you never become numb to the negative feedback as well. What I try to do when we get a bad comment or a review that isn't in alignment with the way, how do we break it down? And then how do we objectively take one or two of the most impactful items that we know are true and apply it to improve our business? And that's not going to go away overnight, but feedback should be utilized to make it better. If I was like, oh, it just doesn't even faze me, then I would be numb to it. And I feel like we wouldn't be serving our customers and employees right. But we also can't get a bad review and go cry in the bathroom for the next 45 minutes, because that's not actually going to fix the problem. Pity me, leave a really catty response. That does absolutely nothing. Bad reviews, as much as we hate it, are the way to actually move forward. Yeah. If you're not getting feedback on what you can do better, then really how are you going to guide the business to be better? So if you can take that review and say, you know what? That's one sliver of feedback and we're going to win an inch more, then every day as you put together a string of feedback, your business is slowly going to improve. If we did not get negative feedback, we'd be tone deaf.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. So you kept growing. I saw a picture, I think it was on Facebook, that you were down in Latin America recently. What was that about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So being serial entrepreneur, for the worst and best use of the term, I started another company about 18 months ago, and we help provide overseas talent for US-based companies. So we find
that's a hot topic, by the way.
It's a very
hot topic. Yeah.
And there's a lot of very valid opinions on it. And some people are like, there's no way in hell I'm going to touch this. And there's other people who see the value in it too. And both are right.
All right, well, break that down, because I have a feeling that we're going to have people on both sides of the fence listening to this.
Absolutely. And there should be. We started hiring people overseas. We have a partnership with Brigham Young University and the BYU Pathways program. The Pathways program is an opportunity for students who live in Latin America or other parts of the globe to go to the same university level classes that I went to. And they can earn their own degree over time. And so we started hiring people to help make calls to the insurance companies. Not that they were interacting with patients, but we started running the numbers on how long hold times could be to get a hold of Delta Dental.
Oh, geez.
And you're paying someone $15 an hour base plus healthcare plus payroll taxes. You're $20 an hour out the door. We could not charge a healthy price to the customers that was also sustainable for them, where there has to be margin for that service within there. So we're like, you know what? If we're calling the insurance company, let's go hire people who on this conversation, you couldn't sense they're from outside the United States. They're incredibly intelligent and hardworking individuals. And they're also about half the cost of doing business or less than the United States. And so we went out there and started doing it. And we just realized that when we selected the right team members over time, they were fully bought in on what we did as a business, fully engaged, and we had lower attrition rates. And keep in mind, this transition for us as a business, Andrew, started during the hiring frenzy of the pandemic, where you could put up a hiring job on the side of the freeway in the state of Utah and you wouldn't get one applicant. I was driving through McDonald's seeing they were paying $19 an hour start today.
Yeah.
And so as wages meteorically rised in the United States and just the ability to retain people, some termed it as the Great Resignation. We couldn't meteorically rise our prices on our customers. So the conversation within the boardroom for us came to, how do we offer the same level of service where we're also not coming back to our customers and saying, yeah, that's 40% more than it was last year. I don't want to be the new egg supplier.
How do you train somebody like that, though, to talk to an insurance company when most of us that have been dealing with insurance companies can't even understand the ins and outs of that discussion?
It's a really good question. It takes a lot of training. And today we run an entirely remote company.
Oh.
So everyone is placed across the United States. We have directors and VPs in Boston, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, people on the West Coast. And so my belief is we are going to hire the right person.
I love that.
And you have to be very intentional on the running of a culture in a remote company. It's not as easy where you pass the desk of Jim and you can say, hey, how's life? How's the kids? You have to be a little bit more intentional. And for our business, it was the right choice. I don't think it's the right choice for every business, but it allowed us to increase our retention and hire globally and within the borders of the United States, the right people at the right place. If you lived in a small town in Montana and you were looking for the right job and you fit our cultural core values, we could hire you. Before, we were very geographically confined to Salt Lake City and the 20 miles surrounding it.
Yeah, but I feel like there's still a margin where someone could totally be BSing their way through all of the interviews and things like that you do. I mean, I guess I do that in person too. I guess there's that. But how do you, from a remote standpoint, find the right talent?
Lots of interviews. I'm not in depth on our recruiting process to give you that answer. And the reality is you hire bad apples and you hire good apples. And the goal is to hire slow and fire fast when needed. But we found that most people by far have great intention. We let go or don't find the right fit with very few people. It's about understanding who you're hiring. I actually think the DISC assessments or kind of people strength-based assessments are very helpful, where you can understand what does this role need, and let's make sure that we hire someone around it. And also their manager understands how they should communicate with them and what their purposes and drives are so that we can work to better as a team. You can't take a blueprint for manager or leadership communication and slap it on everyone. You need to understand all of your direct reports and people around you. And I have to speak differently to some people than I speak to others so that it can be materialized and internalized as a benefit.
For years, I have crapped all over those DISC assessments. I'm saying, if you guys give me one more DISC assessment to take, I'm going to just throw up. But as I moved into leadership roles, you're right on. I couldn't agree
with your crap on it too, because most HR departments are like, great, we're going to give everyone we're hiring a DISC assessment, and then it's never used.
Yes.
If you're not talking about it every month, or if you're just hiring on it, I actually don't think it's worth it. Are you actively using that information? And we find out that some of our managers are great people from an accountability standpoint and terrible from an empathy standpoint. I'm one of them. And so every month I go to one of our coaches and I get training on being a better empathetic leader.
Oh, wow.
I literally had my session this morning. And so awesome. It's understanding those strengths and weaknesses, and you cannot take the stripes off a zebra, but it's also understanding yourself more and the people who report to you understanding you so that you can work better together.
It's interesting. I feel like, I've gone to more of a remote position now recently. I have more communication with my teammates now via video conferencing, instant messaging, whatever, than I did to the person right next to the office next to me back at the home office before. It's been a quite a change. I want to shift a little bit in our conversation. I could probably talk about business with you all day long, but one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, well, actually, this is a long time coming, was because you also made a post, 2022, about a new position that you've recently taken. And I want to talk a little bit about, this month is Parkinson's Awareness Month.
And I think it's something we've never had on the podcast before. And I would love to kind of just give like a rundown of, why did you choose to get involved in the organization? Kind of what's that draw there?
Yeah. So when I was working early at Weave, which all of us probably are aware of, was going to BYU. And I came home one day and my dad was like, oh, I went to the doctor. They told me I had a stroke. My dad began to have tics in his hands. And my dad was relatively young at the time. 47 or 48 years old. And for the next 6 months plus, it was just medical test after medical test, doctors in-state, out-of-state, neurologists, movement disorder specialists, CAT scans, everything you can imagine, just trying to isolate what are some of these changes that he's experiencing where he's less steady. And eventually he saw a doctor who suggested that he may have Parkinson's disease. And he got all the tests done. This took about, from the initial kind of I have a problem, raise the hand moment, took about a year to isolate down doctor after doctor because he had a very minor tic in his thumb. And that's where Parkinson's disease usually starts, from a visual standpoint. And last year, I was 6 years into call force, 5.5 years into call force at that point. And I think I had a mental break one day where I was just like, what's the purpose of what I'm doing here? Like, great, I scheduled dental appointments. That's awesome. But let's be honest, I'm not, solving the cure for cancer over here, as much as we try to profess that. And I have realized that I have been gifted with some relative business skills. And as I grappled at the young age of like, well, what's the purpose of life here? I had won your 30 under 30 awards in your 20 in your 20s. And I had been fortunate to make millions of dollars at that point. And to be honest, I was an empty shell where there was accolades and commas in your bank account. And I was miserable, wondering, what am I really doing here? And so I started taking a step back and saying, what's my purpose? And how can I provide value? And I realized, okay, well, I've got business skills, some level, and I'm really passionate about my family, and I deeply care for my father. My father's the most influential figure in my life, full stop. And so I decided to reach out to the Parkinson's Foundation and say, hey, where are there opportunities to help? And through those conversations over months, met with the CEO, met with the board of directors, eventually early last year joined the board of directors. And then I also lead the Rocky Mountain region for the Parkinson's Foundation as well. And really, it's a twofold passion project here, where there's people actively with Parkinson's disease. And Parkinson's disease, as we're all aware, is a later in life, generally, illness. And it's incredibly lonely. And so our goal is to help take care of those people, whether you're living alone and you need some support and resources, and then also to invest billions of dollars a year into better research and the eventual hope to find a cure. We're different than the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which is fantastic as well. The Michael J. Fox Foundation spends every one of its resources in an attempt to find the cure. Mm-hmm. The Parkinson's Foundation comes down to an educational push, let's take care of our current people, and then let's also spend a good majority of our budget in the research portion. And it's a totally different world. Foundation work is very different than being an entrepreneur. There's a lot of red tape. I'll be the first to admit it. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned here is there's such a lack of awareness on Parkinson's. And it's like any other unique illness, like ALS or MS or some certain types of cancers. And I have empathy for each person who has a family member struggling in one of those areas. But if I could walk away with any kind of magic wand Cinderella moment, it would be to give people the knowledge about what's happening. I look at the movement that existed in the breast cancer world, where so many people are aware of the signs and there's proper screening and there's education and there's a support system. My dream would be over the next 30 years that just along with Parkinson's and many other illnesses, that people become fully aware so that they can sympathize and empathize with people who struggle with it. Because so many people don't know about it, beyond that it's a minor tic and one of their grandparents had it at one point, that Parkinson's is rarely talked about with people who have it. My dad hid it from his employer for the first couple years. Most people, when they are diagnosed with Parkinson's, don't talk about it because they see it as shameful. But breast cancer has gotten to the point where it's like, hey, I've been diagnosed with breast cancer. And people go, I'm so sorry. How can I help support? Because there's less education about Parkinson's, it's seen as shameful. Or people are embarrassed that they have a tick in their hand or that their balance is not as good as they used to be. And in all sincerity, I just wish people didn't have to feel that way, because having a terminal illness and then feeling ashamed about it is a really sickening feeling that I watched in my own home.
Is it really common to have a delayed diagnosis like that?
What do you mean delayed?
I feel like your dad had like a longer journey to finally figure out what was kind of going on with him. But when I see a patient in the chair that might have a tic, you know, are they thinking like, oh, I probably have Parkinson's,
there's also
or
different
I have MS,
reasons
or I have
for
this.
tics. The reason my dad probably didn't get pushed down that path as quick is he was in his 40s. Most people who have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's are in their 70s and above.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's the conclusion that people jump to, but here's a really scary statistic for you, is there's within neuroscience, to treat MS or Parkinson's, there is a particular type of neurologist that you want to see, and that is called a movement disorder specialist. There's 400 movement disorder specialists in the entire U.S.
Isn't there something like 1 million patients for those 400 to treat?
Yeah. It's a minimum of 6. There's 2 in the state of Utah. There's one at the University of Utah and one at Intermountain Healthcare. And those 2 doctors, and they exist in Salt Lake only. So if you live 4 hours away, you're traveling to see the correct doctor. And when my dad was diagnosed with it, he called and said, hey, I've been told to see a movement disorder specialist. He was told, great, we can get you in 6 to 8 months. You have just been given a terminal illness or a lifelong illness that will probably eventually lead to your death. And you're not going to get proper education and healthcare for the next 6 to 8 months, because that is how long the line is.
It's incredible. Oh my gosh. Let me ask this. So first of all, how's your dad doing now? Is it progressing since that point, or is he kind of stabilized? What is the expectation for a progression of this disease?
Yeah, it's interesting. There is no treatment that slows Parkinson's currently.
Interesting.
You're
managing symptoms at that point?
Yeah, you're managed. So the tremors, my dad takes medication every certain day that helps manage some level of the tremors. And it starts in your hands, and then it moves to your arms, and it moves to your voice. So my dad now has a much quieter voice. Like if I'm not in front of my dad, we were on vacation last week as a family, and I was walking behind him multiple times as we were walking along the beach at night, and he would say something, and I'd have to walk in front of him to hear.
Wow.
And he has access to great healthcare. So it is a management of symptoms. But the interesting thing about Parkinson's, to not get too scientific or nerdy here, is it's actually kind of a light switch where you can have 2 years where you have very minor regression or degradation of your motor skills. And then you can have 6 months that drastically take you down that pipeline so it's not you lose 2% of your motor skills and verbal skills per year, and it eventually takes you to net neutral. It is a game based on stress and eating. And if you have higher amounts of stress, you typically see a higher slope, but you can go in a 6-month period and have extreme loss of motor skills. And there's not a bunch of science around what causes that. There is a driver of stress and other things, but the reason it's a stressful illness is there's not a guarantee of predictability. You could have 4 years being like, okay, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. 4 years later, I feel great. This isn't that bad. Your next 6 months could be hell.
Oh,
And you're never going back up that hill. There is no form of a cure. All it is, as you said, is symptom management. So there is no, hey, when your floor is here, the very dark reality is the floor only goes deeper. The floor never goes back up.
Oh my gosh. So you have a bunch of dental people listening to this. Now that we're all really not feeling very comfortable with our knowledge about Parkinson's, where would you suggest that we go find more research? And what kind of things should we be looking into for our patients?
There's a million different things to look into. There's some great books on Amazon that give some light information. There's documentaries that I've watched that are like extremely deep into the science. It's actually just being aware of it. And then when you notice certain people, or if they say I have Parkinson's, talking openly about it and providing empathy and sympathy. We don't need everyone over time to be, I couldn't tell you much about breast cancer from a scientific or clinical standpoint, but I have an immense amount of pain when I hear one of my friends' moms has been diagnosed. And I want people to feel comfortable with their Parkinson's. It's a deck of cards that you cannot control. And so my goal is for people to feel comfortable and for people to have a light enough level of knowledge where they can talk about it and understand it.
Yeah. All right. So we had this big old heavy conversation. We're going to climb back out to the entrepreneurial business thing where I feel a little more safe. So I was on Facebook yesterday, and in one of the groups, someone had mentioned that she was a dental hygienist. She was going back and getting a business degree, and she was asking for anyone that has had went back and got a business degree, came out of hygiene, what can they expect in the business world? And my question for you is, you've seen a lot of stuff. In addition to your own businesses, you just know a lot of people. You have a lot of connections. And so I would love for you to answer that question for her. Give her some advice about what can she expect during a transition from being a dental hygienist into the corporate world. And then are there benefits or are there downfalls, like things that hygienists need to be acutely aware of because they don't really think that way in the corporate world?
So first and foremost, I've never practiced clinically. I've been into hundreds of dental practices. So I don't want to pretend that I've walked that walk from, the op to the side of a small business or even corporate America. But my biggest thing is just to be open to change and to be open to evolving. And as you said, I think it was even before we got on air, to take a leap of faith. People get so over time stuck in their lane and comfortable with what they do. And what I've loved about my entrepreneurial journey, well, mostly love about it, is every day pushes you to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that all I know is if I had practiced clinically for 10, 20, or even 30 years, and then made the switch to joining Zoom meetings and flying across the country to visit clients and going through strategic planning, that's different. Mm-hmm. And we hire people at our businesses all the time who have been regional managers at a DSO in dentistry. We just hired a COO of a 20 location DSO. And when they make that switch over, though we're still a dentistry focused company, it's that fish out of water moment. And you can tell in meetings sometimes that they look there and they're like, I'm uncomfortable. Do I want to retreat to the ground that I know?
I've had that feeling before. I've had that feeling definitely. They start using acronyms or start using terms. I'm like, don't remember that in my business class. And it definitely is unique to this business model.
And
that's great advice.
The better thing, like what I want everyone to know is I have no university degree and I have no formal education. And so everything that I've learned is from screwing it up and trying to make it better. And so though you may walk in here and say, oh, I didn't learn that in my class. Well, I knew nothing walking into it. It's the desire to say, you know what? I sit in meetings today and someone will bring up, hey, are you compliant with this? And I'm sitting there on my screen on the left and typing in, what is SOC 2 compliance? And that's the evolution of learning, of being hungry and saying, you know what? Those are the moments when I have no clue what's happening, where I can actually develop myself personally, but that also professionally develops my career. If you can just become uncomfortable with, or if you can become comfortable being uncomfortable, there's no formal business experience that will ever train you for the everyday ebbs and flows of business. But if you're willing to raise your hand and say, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm really excited to learn about it, people are going to love that.
You know what, though? That message right there is almost the opposite of what we're meant to be as hygienists. We're not supposed to ask the questions, especially heaven forbid in front of a patient. We're not supposed to look dumb to the assistant or to the doctor or to the front office. We're supposed to just know it all and be able to do it all. And so I love that you said that advice, because that's going to be it's going to be really hard to take for a lot of hygienists and or doctors and or assistants, whoever's listening to this that might be doing it. But I love that you said that. All right. This is like for reals last. Oh, this is actually one of my favorite ones. So you are a serial entrepreneur. You go into a bajillion directions, and I want to know your best like time hack, things that save you those precious moments. Because as hygienists, we're always like complain that we never have enough time in the day to do anything. And I'm not expecting you to be like, hey, this is a clinical way to get faster at a procedure or anything like that, but just like something that you do that maybe we can figure out how to implement that into our lives.
Yeah, there's two thoughts here, and I'll be the first to admit I'm no time management expert either. No matter where you are in life, you'll just feel like there's not enough time in the day.
Oh yeah.
But there's two things that have been really influential in helping me prioritize, not manage, prioritize my time better. I was sitting with the founder of Nu Skin, if people are familiar with that company. It's based out of Utah. And every day when he got up, and I do this when I go to bed at night, you get out your whiteboard or your list and you write the 10 most valuable things that will provide the biggest impact to your day tomorrow. And so number one, even though it's a total pain in the ass and could take 4 hours of your day, you do first. And what I do before I write the list is I actually just write everything that's on my head that I think is a priority. And then I reshuffle, visualizing them then I say, oh, that's the one that moves the needle for the company the most. Great. I'm going to slot it in. Number two, I'm going to slot it in. Number three, I'm going to slot it in. I usually build that list to 10. And then I time block my day. But I get up, and beyond meetings, my only goal is to solve number one, because that's what provides the biggest impact. Oftentimes early in my career, I chased checking task box items. And so I'd be like, oh, I washed my car today and I clipped my toenails. I got 2 things done. But then I realized that I didn't open that new banking relationship that would provide us tenfold ability to grow the company going forward. And though it was what I always find is what's number one on my list is usually what makes me most uncomfortable, because it's difficult and it's more time consuming.
Yeah.
But if you chase impact and you develop the discipline to say, you know what, I don't move on until I finish the most impactful item. Some days you only get one thing done, but it's more valuable than the 9 items below that.
I love it.
So that's number one. Number two is it's called Parkinson's Law, and it has nothing to do with Parkinson's disease for some reason, but it is called Parkinson's Law. That time fills the amount of time you give it. And so if you are available to work 14 hours a day, if you say, well, I'll work from here to here, or my yard project today, I've got all day to do it, your yard project's going to take you all day long to get done. Yeah. But if you say, I've got 4 hours to get in the backyard, trim the shrubs, cut the grass, and wash the driveway, you generally get it done. And then you can have a break. And you can leave this in the podcast or not, but I talk about this all the time, is when people work from home or work in an office, they often bring work with them wherever they go. But if you can learn that Parkinson's Law of I work from 8 to 5, but I work hard when I work there, you actually have a better mental balance than, oh, I'm kind of moseying on through my workday. And, oh, great, I worked from 8 to 5 today, but I checked Instagram and I did this. But then you've got 2 or 3 hours to do of work at night. It's incredibly mentally unhealthy. And so if you say, again, to go back to that discipline principle, here's my time. And if I don't get it done at 6 o'clock, when I tell myself work's over till the next day, because then tomorrow I can know I really do have this distinct block of time and I use it more effectively, instead of being a dull knife trying to cut meat, I can actually come in, be refreshed, reset, and focus on my priorities.
I love it. Those are all really smart things that I've tried to do in my life, and I failed at multiple times. I'll just be honest about that one.
Welcome to the boat.
Glad to be on the boat. All right, Cory, if anyone wants to check out the things that you're doing, if they want to reach out to you for any reason, ask any questions, any follow-up, where can they find you? Where can they reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's by far the best place to reach me. Cory Pinegar, CoryPinegar. Feel free to give me an ad and shoot me a message. I respond to all of them.
Awesome. Cory, thank you so much. It's great reconnecting.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.